The hospital room felt unusually quiet, almost as if the walls were absorbing every sound except for the faint beeping of the monitors. The rhythmic noise felt like a ticking clock, reminding me that time was moving forward, even though my world felt frozen. I sat in a chair by the window, cradling my newborn twins. Their tiny faces were scrunched up in peaceful sleep, completely unaware of the storm that was about to change our lives forever. A soft knock on the door broke the silence, startling me. A nurse entered, her expression serious, her eyes filled with a pity she couldn't quite hide. "Mrs. Clow, this letter came for you," she said, gently holding out an envelope. Her tone was careful, as if she feared her words might shatter me. With trembling hands, I took the envelope. As soon as she left, I tore it open, my heart pounding like a drum. The words on the page blurred through the haze of my growing tears, but one sentence jumped out at me, sharp and cruel. "I want a divorce." My breath caught, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Jacob, the man I had loved and trusted, the man I believed would be by my side, no matter what, had chosen to abandon me and our children. Tears stung my eyes as I read on, the letter revealing his affair and his decision to leave us for another woman. The pain was almost unbearable. My heart shattered as I clutched my babies closer, as if holding them tighter might shield me from the reality of his betrayal. How could he do this to us? These tiny miracles in my arms were the result of years of heartache, fertility treatments, and prayers. We had dreamed of this moment, fought for it, and yet Jacob wasn't even there to witness their birth. He was too consumed by his own selfish desires, too focused on his new life to care about the one he was leaving behind. The man I had once trusted with everything had become a stranger, and the future I had envisioned for us crumbled into nothing. Through the tears, I made a silent vow to my children. I would be the strength they needed. I would protect them from the pain their father had inflicted and ensure they grew up surrounded by love, even if I had to create that love on my own. I wouldn't let Jacob's betrayal define us. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would rebuild our lives, not as a victim, but as a survivor. The night was long and sleepless, filled with the soft cries of my babies and the quiet sobbing of my own broken heart. But as dawn's light seeped through the hospital window, I felt a flicker of hope. This was a turning point. I would rise from this heartbreak, stronger than ever, and build a life for my children, a life free from the weight of Jacob's cruelty. Days turned into weeks, and soon I found myself at my brother Zachary's home. He had taken me in without hesitation, offering the kind of support and love Jacob had never been capable of. One evening, while I was feeding the twins, there was a knock at the door. Jacob stood there, his face cold and his words sharper than ever. He handed me divorce papers, his sneer making it clear he felt no remorse. "You're delusional if you think you can handle raising those brats on your own," he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "You'll fail as a mother, just like you failed as a wife." His words stung, each one cutting deeper than the last. But before I could respond, Zachary appeared, his protective fury lighting up the room. "Get out of my house," he growled, his voice steady and firm. Jacob smirked, turning to leave without another word. As the door closed behind him, the silence felt heavy, broken only by the soft coos of my babies in the next room. Zachary placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Don't let his words get to you," he said gently. "You're stronger than him, Chloe. You always have been." His words sparked something inside me, a determination I didn't know I still had. I straightened my back, wiping the tears from my face. "You're right," I said, my voice steadier now. "I won't let him break me." I have these two precious lives depending on me." Zachary smiled, his pride evident. "That's the spirit. We'll figure this out together." In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. Zachary's home became a sanctuary, a place where I could heal and find my strength again. My twins became my world, their tiny fingers and soft giggles giving me a reason to smile every day. One afternoon, as I rocked them to sleep, there was another knock at the door. "It's Lucas," Zachary called from the other room. Hearing his name brought a smile to my face. Lucas, my old college friend, had been a constant source of support during this difficult time. When he stepped into the nursery, his warm smile lit up the room. "There's my favorite little family," he said, his voice filled with affection. Seeing him reminded me of all the good still left in the world. I wasn't alone. With Lucas's support, Zachary's unwavering care, and the unconditional love of my children, I knew I could rise above the pain Jacob had caused. This was just the beginning. A new chapter where I would write my own story, filled with resilience, hope, and the promise of a brighter future. I rose to embrace Lucas with one arm, my other securely cradling my precious baby. He returned the hug gently, careful not to disturb the tiny life nestled against me. His warmth and presence were comforting, like a lighthouse in the stormy sea of my emotions. "You're looking well," he murmured, pulling back slightly to study my face. "Motherhood suits you." His words sparked a sense of pride I hadn't felt in a long time, a stark contrast to the constant insults and criticisms Jacob had hurled at me. Lucas's kindness made me feel valued, seen, and appreciated, things Jacob had never offered. "Thank you for being here," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you and Zachary." Lucas waved his hand dismissively, his expression lightening for a moment. "Don't mention it. That's what friends are for." But then his face turned serious, and he lowered his voice. "Have you given any thought to the legal proceedings?" I nodded instinctively, tightening my hold on my baby. "I want full custody. Jacob doesn't deserve to be a part of their lives, not after everything he's done." Lucas's jaw clenched, and for a moment, the usual calm in his eyes was replaced with anger. "That bastard doesn't deserve anything," he said, his tone sharp. "But don't worry, Chloe. We'll make sure he pays for what he's done." His words filled me with a surge of gratitude, and I reached out to squeeze his hand. "Thank you, Lucas, for everything." His features softened, and he gave my hand a reassuring squeeze in return. "You don't have to thank me. Just focus on being the amazing mom I know you are. Leave the rest to me." As Lucas left, I sat there for a moment, holding my baby close. A new sense of determination began to blossom within me. With Lucas and Zachary by my side, I knew I had a fighting chance to create the life my children deserved, a life filled with love, security, and hope. Jacob might have shattered my world, but he couldn't take away my resolve to rebuild it. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about thriving. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. Each step forward came with its challenges, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hope. My twins were my reason to keep going, my source of strength. Every coo and smile reminded me why I had to keep fighting. I would give them a future untouched by their father's cruelty, a future where they could grow up safe, happy, and loved. Weeks passed. One late night, I found myself sitting at the dining table while Lucas worked on his laptop. The soft glow of the screen illuminated his face, his brow furrowed in concentration. I watched him intently, my heart a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Chloe?" Lucas asked, his voice calm but serious. "Once we go down this road, there's no turning back." I met his gaze, my resolve clear. He brought this on himself. It's time he faced the consequences. Lucas let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair. "All right? I've gathered enough evidence to make this airtight, but we need to be strategic. This has to be flawless." Leaning forward, he began outlining the plan. His words were measured and precise, each detail carefully thought out. "We'll start with a formal demand: full custody, child support, and a fair settlement. If he refuses, we'll expose what we know about his shady business dealings." At the mention of Jacob's professional misdeeds, my stomach tightened. The man I had once trusted had been living a double life, engaging in fraud and deceit that could destroy his entire career. "Do you really think he'll cave?" I asked, doubt creeping into my voice. He's always been so arrogant, so convinced he's untouchable. I said, my voice trembling with frustration. Lucas's expression hardened, his jaw setting with determination. "He won't have a choice. The evidence we have is rock solid. He's cornered Chloe. It's time he learned what it feels like to lose." Hearing his confidence lit a fire within me. I thought about all the pain Jacob had caused, his cruelty, his abandonment, and the way he tried to belittle me. For too long I had lived under the weight of his manipulation and abuse, but not anymore. "Let's do it," I said firmly, my voice steady and resolute. "I'm ready to take back control." A small, determined smile hugged at Lucas's lips. "Then let's make him regret everything." Over the next few weeks, we worked tirelessly to prepare our case. Lucas was a force of nature, his sharp intellect and unwavering commitment unmatched. Together, we combed through every piece of evidence, built a strong legal strategy, and ensured every angle was covered. As the day of the mediation loomed closer, my nerves grew, but so did my determination. This wasn't just about getting justice for myself. It was about protecting my children from a toxic influence. Jacob had taken enough from us. Now it was my turn to take back control and build a brighter future for my family. With Zachary's support and Lucas's expertise, I knew I wasn't alone. Whatever the outcome, I was ready to face it head-on. This wasn't the life I had planned, but it was the one I would fight for, step by step, until my children and I could finally find peace and happiness again. The tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating, like a coiled spring waiting to snap. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, but instead of fear, I felt power coursing through my veins. Jacob had no idea what was coming, and the thought of finally wiping that smug grin off his face filled me with a mix of anticipation and satisfaction. This was my moment, our moment. Lucas sat by my side, his calm presence a reminder that I wasn't fighting this battle alone. For the first time in a long time, I felt ready. When Jacob strutted into the room, his arrogance was palpable. He carried himself like a man who thought the world owed him everything, his cocky smirk a constant reminder of the man he had become. But today, he wasn't in control. Today, the power was mine. Lucas took the lead, his voice steady and firm as he slid a stack of documents across the table. "We're prepared to offer a fair settlement," Lucas said, his tone measured but sharp. "Full custody of the children for Chloe, child support, and substantial alimony payments." Jacob's smug demeanor cracked slightly, his lip curling in disdain. "Are you kidding me?" he sneered. "You expect me to agree to those outrageous demands?" I could feel anger rising in my chest, but before I could speak, Lucas raised a hand, silently calming me. His expression remained unshaken as he met Jacob's glare. "It's a generous offer, given the circumstances." Jacob scoffed, leaning back in his chair as if the situation amused him. "Circumstances?" he repeated mockingly. "You have no leverage here." Lucas's eyes darkened, and he calmly reached into his briefcase. Without a word, he pulled out a thick file and scattered its contents across the table. The sight of financial records, email correspondences, and detailed evidence of Jacob's fraudulent business dealings spread before us like a trap that had finally sprung. The color drained from Jacob's face as he frantically rifled through the papers, his bravado evaporating with every page. Where did you get this?" he stammered, his voice unsteady. "That's not important," Lucas replied coldly. "What matters is that we have everything we need to bury you, both professionally and personally." Jacob's eyes darted back and forth between Lucas and me, his mask of arrogance crumbling under the weight of his predicament. He clenched his fists tightly, his knuckles white with suppressed rage. "What do you want?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. I straightened in my chair, drawing strength from the moment. "Exactly what we asked for," I said firmly. "The settlement, no contest on custody, and your silence. Agree to our terms, and this information stays buried." For a long, tense moment, the room fell silent. Jacob's jaw tightened, his eyes burning with anger and humiliation. The weight of our ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Finally, he exhaled sharply, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine," he spat. "You win." A surge of triumph washed over me, but I refused to let it show on my face. This wasn't a moment for gloating. It was a victory hard-earned, a turning point in a battle that had cost me so much. As Jacob scrawled his signature on the settlement papers, his hand trembling with barely contained fury, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The nightmare was finally over. Lucas and I exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of our success. We had played the game, and we had won. As we gathered our belongings to leave, Jacob's venomous glare followed us. "This isn't over," he hissed, his voice dripping with hatred. I met his gaze unflinching. For the first time in years, I felt a strength within me that he could no longer diminish. "Yes, it is," I said, my voice steady and resolute. "You lost the moment you decided to betray us." With those words, I turned and walked away, leaving Jacob to stew in the wreckage of his own making. The battle had been grueling, but justice had prevailed. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. My future was uncertain, but I no longer feared it. With my children by my side and the unwavering support of people like Lucas and Zachary, I knew I could weather whatever storms lay ahead. In a distant room, the sound of glass shattering echoed through the kitchen as Jacob hurled a tumbler against the wall. Amber liquid splattered across the tiles, and his face was contorted with rage. His fists were clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "How dare she try to ruin me?" he snarled, pacing the room like a caged animal. Across the room, his mistress, Hannah, stood with her arms crossed. Her expression was a mix of fear and disgust. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you screwed her over," she snapped, her voice sharp and cutting. Jacob whirled around to face her, his eyes wild with fury. "Shut your mouth," he growled, taking a threatening step forward. "This is all her fault. She pushed me into this." Hannah recoiled slightly, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Don't you dare blame her for your mistakes," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "You made your bed, Jacob. Now you have to lie in it. His laughter was bitter and humorless. "Oh, I'll make her pay," he spat. "She thinks she's won, but I'm just getting started." With that, he stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard that the windows rattled. Hannah sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. The illusion of their perfect life together was crumbling, and for the first time, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Meanwhile, I sat across from Lucas, a steaming mug of coffee in my hands. The events of the mediation were still fresh in my mind, and as I recounted everything to him, his expression remained thoughtful and serious. "You handled yourself perfectly," he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "You stood up to him, Chloe. You took your power back." I nodded, the weight of the day slowly giving way to a sense of relief. "I couldn't have done it without you," I admitted, my voice soft. "For the first time, I feel like I can breathe again." Lucas smiled, his eyes warm and encouraging. "This is just the beginning," he said. "You've taken the first step, and now you get to write the rest of your story. Jacob's out of the picture. It's your time to shine." As I sat there, the idea of my new beginning started to sink in. The battle had been long and painful, but it was over. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. And with Lucas and my children by my side, I knew I was ready to face whatever came next. "I can't believe he had the audacity to threaten you," Lucas said, his voice laced with disgust as he shook his head. "The man has no shame." I shrugged, trying to mask the lingering fear that clung to the edges of my resolve. "It's just empty bravado," I said, forcing a faint smile. "He's all bark and no bite." Lucas's expression darkened, his jaw tightening as he leaned closer. "I wouldn't be so sure," he murmured, his voice low with concern. "Jacob's a desperate man now, and desperate men are capable of dangerous things." A chill ran down my spine at his words, but I pushed the unease aside. I couldn't afford to let fear control me anymore. "Even if he tries something, we'll be ready," I replied, my voice firm with determination. "We have the upper hand now." Lucas nodded, but the lines of worry etched into his forehead didn't fade. He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "Just promise me you'll be careful," he said softly. "I don't want anything to happen to you or those beautiful kids of yours." I squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his unwavering support. "I promise," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "We've come too far to let him win now." As the days passed, Jacob's world continued to crumble. News of his professional misdeeds spread through the business community like wildfire. Clients and colleagues, once eager to associate with him, began to distance themselves, horrified by the extent of his deceit. One by one, his allies vanished, leaving him isolated in a world of his own making. Hannah, unable to bear the weight of the scandal, packed her bags and left without a word. She disappeared as quickly as she had entered his life, leaving Jacob alone to face the consequences of his actions. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a sense of vindication washing over me. Jacob had thought he could break me, that his power and arrogance would shield him from accountability. But in the end, his own greed and hubris had been his undoing. As I held my children close, their innocent laughter filling the room, I knew I had won the most important battle of all, the ability to provide them with a safe, loving home free from their father's toxic influence. Jacob's downfall was more than just a lesson in karma. It was a reminder that no one, no matter how powerful, could outrun the truth forever. One quiet evening, the sharp ring of my phone shattered the peaceful silence. Glancing at the caller ID, I felt my stomach drop. It was Lucas. "Hello," I answered, a sense of dread settling in the pit of my stomach. "Chloe, you need to turn on the news right now," Lucas said, his voice urgent, sending a chill down my spine. Without hesitation, I grabbed the remote and switched on the TV. The screen lit up, and my breath caught in my throat as the headline flashed across the screen. Asterisk asterisk local businessman embroiled in fraud scandal asterisk asterisk. There, larger than life, was Jacob's face. His expression was a mixture of defiance and barely concealed panic as he was swarmed by reporters. "Mr. Chloe, is it true that you've been embezzling funds from your company?" One reporter shouted, thrusting a microphone in his face. "No comment," Jacob growled, his jaw clenched as he tried to push his way through the throng. The questions came fast and relentless. "What about the allegations of insider trading? Can you confirm or deny your involvement? How do you respond to claims that you've been bribing officials to secure contracts?" Jacob's composure cracked. His face twisted in rage as he lashed out at the nearest reporter. "Get those cameras out of my face," he snarled, his voice breaking with frustration. The scene descended into chaos, reporters shouting over one another, flashing cameras capturing every moment as Jacob fought to escape the barrage of questions. I sat frozen, watching the spectacle unfold. My heart pounded in my chest, a mixture of disbelief and vindication swirling within me. This was it, the final nail in the coffin of Jacob's once flawless reputation. The news coverage shifted to a panel of analysts dissecting the scandal and speculating about the legal ramifications. Their words barely registered. All I could focus on was the reality of what was happening. Jacob's carefully constructed empire had crumbled, and now the world was bearing witness to the true depths of his depravity. The buzz of my phone pulled me out of my thoughts. It was Lucas again. "Did you see it?" he asked, his voice tinged with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. "I saw it," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's really happening, isn't it?" Lucas let out a long exhale. "Yes, it is, and there's no turning back now." A heavy silence hung between us, the weight of the situation settling like a thick fog. "Are you okay?" Lucas asked, his voice soft with concern. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I'm okay," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "This is what we wanted, isn't it? For him to face the consequences of his actions." "Yes," Lucas admitted, "but that doesn't make it any easier. You're allowed to feel conflicted, Chloe. This is a lot to process." I swallowed hard, my gaze drifting to the corner of the room where my twins slept peacefully in their cribs. Their tiny faces were serene, blissfully unaware of the storm raging around them. They were my anchors, my reason to keep moving forward. "I'll be fine," I said, more to myself than to Lucas. "This is just the beginning of a new chapter, one where Jacob's shadow doesn't touch us anymore." "Exactly," Lucas replied. "And remember, you're not alone in this. You've got me, Zachary, and those two little miracles to keep you strong." As I hung up, I looked toward the future with cautious hope. Jacob's collapse was a harsh reminder of the cost of betrayal, but it also marked the start of something new. I had fought for this moment, and now it was here. With my children by my side and the unwavering support of those who truly cared for me, I knew I could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The storm had passed, and for the first time, I felt the warmth of the sun breaking through. "I know," I said, my voice heavy with emotion, "but I have to stay strong for them. They deserve a life free from the toxic legacy their father left behind." I glanced at my sleeping twins. Their peaceful faces were a reminder of why I had to keep moving forward. Lucas was silent for a moment, his expression softening. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a quiet pride that made my heart ache in the best way. "You're an incredible woman, Chloe. Never forget that." As I ended the call and set the phone down, a wave of reflection washed over me. The long and grueling journey that had brought me to this point played in my mind like a film. Jacob's public disgrace had been the final act, the culmination of his selfish actions and choices. Yet, as I watched the news replay the scene over and over, his face twisted with panic, his empire crumbling, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction. There was only a profound sadness for the man he had become and an unyielding determination to ensure my children would never carry the weight of his misguided choices. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was crystal clear. Jacob's reign of terror was over. It was time for me to step into the light, to embrace the future with open arms and a heart filled with hope. The soft glow of birthday candles illuminated the room, flickering across the faces of my loved ones as they gathered around the twins' cake. Their smiles were warm and genuine, radiating the kind of love that had carried me through the darkest days of my life. It was hard to believe an entire year had passed since that fateful day in the hospital, the day my world had been shattered by Jacob's betrayal. But as I looked around the room, surrounded by the people who had stood by me when everything seemed lost, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed with gratitude. Zachary stood across the table, his eyes shining with pride. He had been my rock, his unwavering support a constant source of strength. Beside him sat Lucas, his hand resting lightly on my arm, a silent reassurance that I was no longer alone in this journey. The twins giggled and clapped their tiny hands, oblivious to the tumultuous journey that had brought us to this moment. For them, it was simply a day of celebration, a moment to revel in the unconditional love that surrounded them. As the birthday song faded into a chorus of cheer, I felt tears prick my eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming joy of knowing how far we had come. The pain and fear that had once consumed me seemed like a distant memory. Jacob's betrayal had nearly broken me, but it had also been the crucible that forged me into the woman I was now, stronger, more resilient, and unafraid to face the future. "Blow out the candles, Mommy," one of the twins exclaimed, their tiny voice pulling me from my reverence. I smiled and leaned down, pressing a kiss to each of their foreheads. Taking a deep breath, I extinguished the flickering flames with one decisive puff. Cheers erupted around the room, filling the air with a warmth that reached deep into my soul. This was my life now, a life filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. As the party wound down and the last of the guests trickled out, Lucas lingered behind. He watched me tidy up, his gaze soft and affectionate. "You've come so far, Chloe," he said, his voice laced with pride. "I can't even begin to tell you how amazed I am by your strength," Lucas said, his voice filled with admiration. I paused, turning to face him with a grateful smile. "I couldn't have done it without you," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. "You helped me find my way when I thought I was lost forever." Lucas shook his head, his eyes shining with quiet intensity. "You found your own way," he said, stepping closer. "I was just lucky enough to walk beside you." Our gazes locked, and for a moment, the air seemed to crackle with unspoken emotion. The bond we had forged through fire and adversity felt undeniable. Without overthinking it, I closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his in an attentive, exploratory kiss. Lucas froze for a heartbeat before melting into the embrace, his arms wrapping around me with a tenderness that threatened to undo me. When we finally pulled apart, breathless and flushed, I let out a soft laugh, my heart thundering in my chest. I never thought I'd find happiness again, I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. Lucas cupped my face in his hands, his touch warm and reassuring. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Chloe," he said, his voice fierce with conviction. "And I'll spend every day making sure you get it." As he pulled me into another searing kiss, I knew that this was the beginning of something new, something beautiful. A chapter filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a future untainted by the shadows of my past. Jacob's influence no longer loomed over me. His betrayal had once felt like an insurmountable blow, but it had also pushed me to discover my strength, my resilience, and my worth. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't fear the unknown. With my children by my side and Lucas's love guiding me, I felt unstoppable. This was my life now, and I was ready to embrace it with everything I had. The scars of my past no longer defined me. They were merely a testament to my survival, a reminder that I had the power to rise, to thrive, and to build a life filled with joy and possibility. This was my story, and I was finally the author of my own destiny.